I like doing segments about how dangerous the world can be periodically. And I think it's important to be vigilant and strong and not let your guard down. Now, as many of you may know, earlier this morning I made a video about someone coming to my house at 4:30 in the morning, and I believe they were trying to get into my house silently. I could be wrong. I don't want to have an optimism bias, right? If you're not familiar with what that means, it's that you assume negative things can't happen to you, and people have this. I also don't want to have a pessimism bias, and that's where you assume negative things are more likely to happen to you. But when someone shows up to my house at a time where we're putting on an event and there's threats, and I just recently had a conversation with some police officers several times, then it's a terrible idea to show up to someone's house at 4:30 in the morning, no matter who you are or why. And I will stress, you're lucky if you walk away from something like that, trying to pop someone's door handle, go in their house, or do anything at 4:30 in the morning, especially at a heightened moment like this. And I will stress there's certain things about my neighborhood that make it even more alarming somebody would show up. No car, no lights. So here's the story. An intern, 27, is knifed to death by a man who targeted her at random while she was walking a dog in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of things about left-leaning politics that can only exist in a secure state, and I am well aware of this. I am also well aware that a lot of my political views, which are rather moderate, are only possible because the United States is so safe, and I call it hard mode. My politics are on the left libertarian side, which means cooperative markets leaning towards, I'm not far left or anything like that, and libertarian, meaning you can't force someone to do it. So here's the easiest way to explain it to people. Do I believe taxation is a good thing? I absolutely do. Do I believe the government should be able to mandate and show up at your house at gunpoint and arrest you and lock you up because you don't want to pay it? Absolutely not. But I do lean towards a cooperative system where we can agree to pitch in to some kind of system. And so that's what makes me, slightly to the left, that I believe these programs can work. I want to highlight this story and talk about this woman for a few reasons. Based on what happened this morning, I think it's important to talk about how the world is dangerous. And because we've made this place so safe, you now have people acting like they can walk around in the middle of the night without protection. They don't need, the Second Amendment and things like that. Now, I've never been anti-Second Amendment. Absolutely not. But I am fairly moderate, right? I'm open to listening to conversations about ways we can, I don't know. It's difficult. Because there's the argument of why would you restrict a legal and lawful gun owner who are it's like you got the likelihood that a legal gun owner commits a crime like, what we've seen in the past is you have a better chance of winning the lottery. So sometimes it doesn't make sense. These a lot of the laws proposed, like the assault weapons ban, and I'm not for those things. And I'll tell you this, waking up to that, that sound, I'll tell you what, the first thing I was looking for is like, what can I have? And even some law enforcement alluded to the Second Amendment, as did many other people. And so I believe, home defense, spot on, like Dave Chappelle did. This, let me not, beat around the story. This is a woman who was 27, and she was killed at random in D.C. while walking a dog. And that's the bulk of the story, right? I highlight this for a couple of reasons. Random. That's the key word. Random. This is somebody who was walking a dog, a 27-year-old woman fatally stabbed walking a dog in D.C., and it was a random attack. Her name was Marjorie McGill. Rest in peace. I'm sorry to her friends and family. It's a tragic story. And I mean in no way to be disrespectful to her or anything like that. I'm hoping that, as tragic as this was, there can be something, helpful to other people. I hear so often, mostly from the left, that teach men not to rape or whatever. And it's like, listen, man, I know all of you guys know it, but I really wanted to just talk about this. Sometimes people are crazy. Sometimes people don't think straight. You don't know what their intentions are. So, for me, having someone show up to my house in the morning, I'm not going to make an assumption about who you are or what you want. Or I'm sorry. I will make that assumption. I'm not going to assume optimism. I'm going to assume pessimism. Why? Because you see stories like this. This woman's walking her dog, and she sees a man, and she probably says, you know what? I think nothing of it. Next thing you know, he's pulled out a knife, and he's ended her life. I also wanted to talk about this too because I think it's a really important thing to talk about in DC and the violence and stuff, and it also outside of the world is dangerous and you need to be prepared to protect yourself at all times. I'll finish off this point by saying perhaps it would be wise to take a self-defense course. It's crazy to me that a lot of places, a lot of cities make it illegal to have any kind of self-defense weapon. It's kind of nuts. Like even pepper spray in some places is illegal, and that's not even necessarily that effective. But self-defense classes, because when you have this optimism bias that'll never happen to you, that's when it does. But I want to make another point too. There's a reason why I wanted to talk about this. A couple reasons. For one, obviously the video I did this morning was freaky. Somebody showing up to my house. Wow, that was a terrible, terrible idea. And after I filmed the video, I ended up talking to some of the police and stuff. And apparently the person left a note, which I didn't read. The cops took it as evidence, I suppose. The other thing, though, is I want to talk about conspiracy theories. And I think this is an interesting story to say. When you have like an optimism bias or a pessimism bias, you're making an assumption about what could or couldn't happen. And with DC, we go back to the story about Seth Rich. NBC News hilariously tried to smear me when I went to the White House summit as someone who's pushed the conspiracy simply because I said I give it a less than 100% chance Fox News was correct. Fox News reported that it was basically true, and I said I didn't believe it. And they claimed that was pushing it. Well, no, I've never believed it was true, and I've never pushed it. I've always actually provided healthy skepticism, especially when we didn't have a lot of details. But I want to highlight this story because this woman was an intern. She worked on, policy issues. There's no conspiracy here. These things, this is the real world. People are dangerous. Don't be fearful of every human, but just recognize it happens. The danger is real, and it's rare, but it's real. Seth Rich was killed in what they believe, my understanding is a botched robbery. But a lot of people believe it was political, and they believe that he leaked information to WikiLeaks. I'm not going to play any of that game. You know why? Because the simple solution is the world is dangerous. The world is not a perfect Skittles and candy canes, rainbows, unicorns. You can be walking your dog in DC and someone could just kill you for no reason. And it's sad. I'm really, really sad. They say that it wasn't a robbery. They say that he didn't try to take anything. Wasn't a sexual assault. Literally just killed her for no reason. And the same can be true for someone like Seth Rich. But when you add that political story, the guy worked for the DNC, all of a sudden now everyone wants to ascribe some kind of like ulterior motive to the assailants. When in reality, I think we all need to realize that we've taken our safety for granted. I feel like one of the only reasons you have a left wing, a far left that detests police is because they're safe. It's true. It's because they don't have to call someone to show up at their house at 4 a.m. And if you don't know what that's like, to wake up at 4 a.m. and call the police and be like, thank you for coming here because I don't know, what I should or could do. I don't know what this person's presented. And it's those officers who are prepared for the worst. And if you don't understand, that fear of danger because you've never encountered it, well, then you're going to find yourself believing the world is Skittles and lollipops. And that, in my opinion, lets your guard down. I don't think we should build a world where we have people, carrying around AR-15s and swords and armor all the time. But I also don't think we should disarm ourselves. I mean that figuratively and literally. I mean, mentally disarm ourselves as well as the police and our security, apparatus to a certain extent, and firearms, simply because we've started experiencing things less. I feel like that's an optimism bias. You have a lot of people who will be, I have people who said to me, why would anyone ever need a firearm? Why would anyone? And I'm like, clearly you live in a wealthy area with low crime and you live in an area with low poverty, and you've never had a scare. You've never had someone try breaking in your house. You've never come home to see your house ransacked. You've never had strange people following you. You've been safe. And that's because we've made this country very, very safe. And crime has gone down. And now people are taking it for granted. Now they're talking about how the cops are bad and all that stuff. And it's like, look, there are some bad cops. And there's a bad culture in many departments. But on average, the local guys in my neighborhood, good dudes. We had a laugh and they came over and they said, don't worry, we got you. We'll take care of everything. And I appreciate it. And that's being taken for granted. Get rid of the cops. Get rid of your defense. And then wait for that one crazy person who for no reason decides to end a young woman's life. And what are you going to do? And the point is brought up further and a lot by, people who are pro-gun, pro-2A. When you have, what is the saying? It's, when the cops will be there in minutes, seconds matter or something like that. Yeah, I'm sitting here in my room with someone, knocking on the door at 4:30 in the morning after we've been getting threats about the event, and I'm thinking, what are my options? Exit, answer the door? Not a good idea. Not a good idea. 4:30 in the morning, no cars. The person walked here. So what am I supposed to do? Well, I don't want to get the officer in trouble, but he said something like, if it were me, I'd answer the door with with some home defense, to say the least. And I laughed, and I was like, I hear you, man. I hear you. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Because even the cops know. Even the cops know. And here's the thing. A lot of people will say there's a risk of accidents. No, you can be responsible. And if something happened where somebody was trying to break into my house and I had a weapon, like Dave Chappelle said, birdshot, buckshot, birdshot, buck, buck, buck. And you give them a warning. The click-clack is that warning. And then when the police arrive, you put it down and you call the police, hey, I'm coming out. And they'll say, hey, come on out, and we're good to go. So anyway, this is kind of like an addendum to the video earlier this morning. I was reading the news and I saw this story, and I like talking about this. I do. There's stories every so often that show you that the world is not safe, even in our own country. A lot of the videos I've done talking about the world as a dangerous place highlight foreign countries. Seriously, like Tajikistan. And we as Americans roll our eyes and say, well, of course Tajikistan's not safe. They've got ISIS nearby. Well, here's a story for you about Washington, D.C., one of the wealthiest districts, I guess, in the country. And it was a young woman who thought that she could just go walk her dog. And a crazy person, for seemingly no reason, just decided to end her life. And I wonder if there was something she could have done that would have prevented this. Let's be real. In a lot of circumstances, a gun is ineffective against a knife. This is a fact. People might make the joke, but you brought a knife to a gunfight, and it's like, actually, that's actually good. So, watch the videos. I've watched the videos on this, where you can see, it was Mythbusters actually, I think, did this. And they said, what's better in close range? In reality, a knife is. Because drawing a weapon, and firing it takes longer than, I think they said that you could close the gap of 20 feet and hit someone with a fatal shot with a knife, hit him with a knife before they have a chance to fire a round. 20 feet. And that's what people don't understand is when you see these cops and they're close to somebody and they start shooting because they know what the guy has, everyone says he had no reason to do it. And it's like, man, you don't understand the training. I would prefer, less lethal weapons for a lot of cops, for sure. I don't think people need to die because things got tense. But even in this, even if she had a gun in D.C., this guy would have walked up to her and she would not have been able to defend herself with it before he killed her, So the point I'm trying to make is, it's not so much whether or not you have a weapon for defense. It's whether or not you're alert, you understand the danger, and you don't take your safety and security for granted. You don't just get used to everything being safe and fine all the time. I guess because for me, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I've never felt like I'm ridiculously safe all the time. So when, I'm walking down the street, I'm watching shadows. That's Chicago. And so I know the danger, and I think growing up in a difficult place with real threats makes you more moderate. I don't want to say conservative because I think, there's different aspects like family, tradition, and things like that that'll make you conservative. But growing up in a blue city made me very liberal. And then experiencing, hardship, homelessness, and the threats of violence made me realize a lot of these things these people espouse on the far left about, banning guns or whatever, and not all of them, a lot of the far left people want guns. It comes from a place of privilege. And I'll say it. It's true, though. It's wealthy people who, live in an area with no crime, little poverty, and they never have to worry about anything. And they say, I don't need to defend, a firearm. Why would anybody else? And I admittedly don't live in a bad area. I'm just in a normal, middle-class suburb. But yeah, when you live, people face real danger. And this story is not a good example of an instance where you could be protected by a weapon. This story is the perfect example of there's some things that it's just not safe. And to the people who think that everything's going to be a utopia and everything will be fine, I try to remind you, no matter what policies you pass, no matter what weapons you ban, no matter what you do, a crazy person will do a crazy thing. And look, I get it. This was one woman, and I'm so sorry to hear her passing. This was brutal. At least it wasn't 15 people with a gun. But at the same time, how you deal with crazy people is an entirely different question. And it's hard. It's like, I ask you, what are you going to do? Do the UK does and ban knives? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely, you can't do that. People need knives. It's a tool. But not only that, I've seen people take a padlock and tie it to a shoestring and swing it and whack people with it. And that can kill you too. So it's, I guess the point is, I'll wrap it up here because I don't want to make it too long. Is yeah, I've been thinking about the dangers of the world, especially since the video this morning, and the world is dangerous, and some things are out of your control. Stop thinking you can control everything, and start realizing that you can't change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. So in the event a crazy person comes storming at you, if you've prepared your ship, you can weather that storm. But if you take it for granted and assume the storm will never come, you will capsize. Thanks for hanging out. Next segment will be at 4 p.m. youtube.com/Timcast, different channel. I will see you all there.